17. I can't believe there's been 17 of these, and they're keeping me on the air. It's Inside the Game on OneSoccer and the OneSoccer digital platforms. We are your isolation destination, and we continue to be. I am Gareth Wheeler. Now, we're not out of the woods yet, but it looks like we're moving in the right direction. MLS teams are now training in full capacity to some degree. Top leagues, they're on the verge of coming back as well. We hope to hear something about the Canadian Premier League very soon. Tonight, we're back at it as we carry on our interview series. We were off last week with the Atletico Ottawa kit launch. It was a big success. Congratulations to everyone in our nation's capital. And on Tuesday, we stepped aside to take time to reflect, to talk, and to listen. So look, the past few months have been exceptionally difficult for all of us. And the last 10 days, well, they've been incredibly difficult as well. So we're going to get back at it tonight. We're going to celebrate soccer stories and talking about the game we all love and support. And tonight, another great guest joining the show. If you have any questions, at Gareth Wheeler on Twitter, use the YouTube chat, ask away. This guy's an open book, and it's going to be great. Joining me tonight, he is a Toronto FC legend and an absolute beauty. Once upon a time, this man had flowing locks up top, not just what's on his face right now, a brand new look for him. He was really the definition of cool in the game. I can't believe I'm admitting that to him right now. Footballer by day, DJ by night. He kicked off his career with QPR, scoring on his first team debut for the club. Not a bad start, which led to over 400 professional games, over 100 goals scored. He had stops in Italy and famously right here in Toronto as well. Sunderland and West Brom were also among the 11 clubs that he represented over his 17-year playing career. His goal-scoring prowess, his big physical style, warmed him up to crowds across the globe. It's funny how things work out because in the twilight of his career, he made this move across the Atlantic and became a local legend in the city of Toronto. With the long hair, long gone, he scored the first goal in Toronto FC club history, May 12th, 2007. He probably has that tattooed somewhere on his body in the 24th minute, and his name is still sung from the rafters in the 24th minute, and his name still celebrated as part of Toronto FC's history on their wall of fame. Now, there's been a ton of change at TFC over the years, but he's remained the constant from player to coach to ambassador to a really essential member of the Toronto FC Academy setup as well, and now with Toronto FC too. It speaks volumes that he and his family decided to stay in this country after he stopped playing. Where now, I guess that was over 10 years ago now, he continues to develop, teach, and really lead our young players of tomorrow. Believe it or not, he remains a legend off the field, as likable as they come, whether it's on the podcast, Footyprime, whether it's on television or in the community as well. It's a pleasure to welcome in my good friend, Deech, the one, the only Danny Dichio inside the game. What's going on, buddy? And where did this come from?
I have no idea where this has come from, Wills. Thanks for having me on the show, first of all. But going back to the beard, it's growing in the opposite direction, as you can tell. I've been trying to grow it up top, but it's growing profusely around my chin and jaw now. So I've just stuck with it. It's my COVID beard at the moment.
I look, on the field, you were intimidating because of your size, your presence. If you had the beard, buddy, that's a whole nother level. What took you so long?
I would have been embraced by the hockey community as well, wouldn't I?
Totally. It's a good look. Were you trying to grow this out up top?
I was about 7-8 years ago, or maybe 10 years ago.
I remember that.
I've lost hope now, to be quite honest. And I think my kids would find me very weird if I started growing hair now.
See, I'm going with the one last stand. I'm growing it out. I haven't cut my hair throughout this pandemic, so I'm going to see how it works out. It's slowly coming along, but I think I'm going to go the way of Danny Dichio sometime soon.
You should do it. It's a good look.
I don't know. See, a handsome man like you can pull it off. Me, not so much. Danny, how are you getting on through these past few months, just kind of away from the game of football? I know that you're doing Zoom calls and you're keeping connected from distance, but this has to be something completely different for you.
Yeah, this is something I've never, for the most part of us, I've never been involved with before. And it's been frustrating at times, to be quite honest, Gareth. It's been very difficult at times for myself because since 9 years old, I've always been on a football pitch or a football field, whether it be training as a young schoolboy, then an apprentice, then a professional, then a coach. So it's been something that's been part of my everyday life. So to have that not taken away from me, but to not have that schedule and that everyday purpose to go and be a part of something on the field or on a pitch has been very, very strange for me. And I can understand why a lot of people, whether they be a professional sports person or a business person or in the media, have found it difficult because the everyday routine has changed so much, and it's getting used to that, but also trying to stay strong mentally and positively as well.
So what have you been doing to keep busy, really, Deech?
Well, luckily, we've been back for 3 weeks now with Toronto FC 2 with
Good.
our younger players. We've been individual training, 4 players at a time on the field, and we've split the fields up into 2. We've kind of mirror image what the first team have been doing. Obviously, the first team have been off for the past 4 or 5 days now, so with the lockout, but we've still been training. So thankfully, for 3 days of the week, I've been involved with that. But we've been involved in a lot of, as you said, Zoom calls. There's this term Zoom fatigue, which has definitely hit me at times. But we've been kept active and busy in that sense, whether it be tech meetings or tactical meetings, and Greg giving us some homework and some stuff to do as well as a group with the first team coaches involved has been great. So the togetherness and the community spirit that Toronto FC have has been kept going, but it's just missing that being on the field, which I've struggled with.
How are the young players getting on? Because it's exceptionally difficult for them as well.
Well, they've been eager, they've been eager to get back at it. You can tell they've kind of had the reins on them as well because they've been isolated to working in their grids. They can see their teammates from afar over the other field, but the process has been super professional with TFC, like going through the screening process at the beginning, having your temperature taken, being escorted to your grid and only being allowed in that field. Us as coaches, we can walk around the field to encourage them and to give them some pointers, but they're basically being left alone in their grid to work and keep up their fitness. So I can understand from a young player's point of view how frustrating it is. These are young guys. They want to socialize as well as play football, and it's been difficult for them, but their attitude and their work rate has been first class.
And you're a part-time babysitter as well. Not the players; they're mature enough. I mean, with Charmin and Forrest on the Footyprime podcast, I'm really enjoying it because you three are 3 of my favorites. Big personalities, characters, and you guys have a lot of fun with it as well. So I'm sure that you're not getting paid what you deserve babysitting those guys on a regular basis, because that's really a handful, Deech.
Yes, it's a tough job, to be quite honest, especially with Craig Forrest, who's a prima donna himself, and then Shams, who's the advocate of pies and all kinds of things going on at the moment. But those guys have been keeping my spirits up. We've been trying to keep that podcast going weekly, not only for the people that want to hear the new news that's going on around the world and listen to our terrible banter, but also for us as well to keep connected and to try and keep being positive and hopefully have some good news with the Bundesliga being back on now, MLS coming back shortly, La Liga coming back, hopefully good news with CPL and MLS and USL coming back. So slowly but surely, I think we're going to be having some good news as a whole, whether it be in media, whether it be as coaches, whether it be as players, and we can get back to some kind of normality soon, Gareth.
Beautiful. We'll talk about what the real football world will look like a little bit later on in the podcast, including your time and what you're doing today with Toronto FC too. But I want to get into that hot tub time machine and spin us back to the start of Danny Dichio's playing career, because there's probably a large contingent of Toronto FC fans out there that know the name, know your game on the field from playing with Toronto FC, but maybe they don't know where you came from and kind of your path that led you to Major League Soccer and your new home here in Toronto. So how did you get involved in the game? What was your first memory in terms of involvement in the game of football?
Well, coming from a family where my father's Italian, my mother's English, we grew up with football in our household. My dad was a big football fanatic, big AC Milan fan. And my earliest memories was going to watch him play and just playing on the sideline. He took me to my local club, QPR, from a young age, 6 months old. He used to bring me in and watch the game. Not that I would remember much of that, but it was something that was installed in me at an early age. And we talk about culture and what we have in Europe, but it was the love of the game and wanting to not only watch it, but to also play it, whether it be by myself outside with a ball, driving my neighbors crazy by banging a ball against the garage, or hitting against the wall by myself, or playing with my friends on the street, going up to the park to play in a local five-a-side league that I used to play in, and then eventually signing with QPR at 9 years old after being scouted. So it was a slow progression, but a big love of mine from an early age.
9 years old. I mean, what made you stand out? I mean, you're a big guy. How tall are you? 6'3", 6'4"?
6'4" now, yeah.
Were you always a big kid?
I was a big gangly kid from probably the age of around 11, 12 when I had a big growth spurt, yeah.
And they called you the Hammersmith Horse. Is that true? When did you get that nickname?
I don't know why they actually call me the Hammersmith Horse, because I'm not from Hammersmith.
You're from Notting Hill, right?
Yeah, I was born in Hammersmith Hospital, which is our local hospital, but I was brought up in Notting Hill, Portobello Road, which is a different part of West London in all. Ladbroke Grove is my local area. It's a big QPR area. We have three big clubs in my town, Gareth. We have Chelsea, Fulham, and QPR, which are basically in a 2-mile radius of each other. So I was born and bred QPR. A lot of my friends were Chelsea, some were Fulham. So to have three massive football clubs in your area, not only to go and watch, but to banter with other players, other fans, other friends in school, only added to the spice of loving the game.
I mean, 9 years old, that's very young for a club to just put their arm around you, bring you in, and you stay with them to make your first team professional debut with them as well. I mean, how does that work in terms of an area where it's so much competition in terms of clubs just trying to find young players to bring into their system?
It's very difficult. I think my journey was helped because of my love for the club as well. I love QPR. I was approached at 15 just before signing YTS, which is basically your youth training scholarship forms, by Arsenal to go to Arsenal. But Arsenal was literally an hour and a half away from me on the tube, on the train every day. And I'd grown up at QPR, and the big club of Arsenal had just won the title back in those days, and they were a very famous club. But my father and myself and people close to me were big QPR fans, and we thought if I had a chance of making it and making my dream come true, I had more of a chance of developing and progressing through the ranks at QPR, which is undoubtedly a smaller club, a smaller community family club, and I would have a better pathway in getting there. Not saying it was easy. I think there was some fortune along the road as well, Gareth, because any player will tell you you can come up through the ranks and have a coach or a manager that doesn't particularly like your style of play. I was a midfielder until I was 14 years old, if you can believe. I'd only played central midfield for my youth team, and then for my club team, and then for QPR. And then it was only at 15 that my academy director kind of knocked me on the shoulder and basically said, you're not going to play central midfield anymore. You're going to play as a striker. We've got another boy that we want to develop who's a year younger than you, and we feel that you can complement each other. So you're playing as a number 9 from now on. And I didn't have a chance to say no. I was basically thrown into the fire, and I loved playing in that position. And possibly that was what really pushed me on to being a professional as well, because I don't think I would have had the endurance to play a central midfield as a professional, Gareth, to be quite honest.
Right. Yeah, that's what I was going to say. It's a lot less running, but it's kind of funny. Maybe how you've worked with the Toronto FC Academy. There's always this push for positionless players that can play all over the park in different ways. When you were growing up playing, things were much more regimented, weren't they? So making that move and converting you from a midfielder to a striker at that time, how often did that happen to players that were coming up like yourself?
I would say maybe once. It would happen to a player that the club had thought he was going to develop and play in one position. And then suddenly his second chance was to possibly say, okay, he's not going to be a right winger, or he's not going to be an attacking mid. let's try him at right back or defender because he has some qualities or characteristics that maybe benefit him playing in that position better. So I'd say it happened once. What we're seeing now is a totally different turnaround, Gareth. And in youth soccer, you're seeing not only players come to coaches, but parents as well, telling coaches, my son doesn't play that position or he doesn't feel comfortable in that position, where I find that very, very strange when you're talking to a coach who has experience in the game and you're trying to tell him where your son's or daughter's best position is. And I can respect their opinion for sure, but surely if my youngest son plays baseball, he plays AAA baseball, and I would never ever go to the coach and say, hey coach, I think he's better at third base than he is at first base, or he's better at infield, or it's just not in my DNA that I would say that. I respect their position. I respect the time and hours they put in with my son, and they will make the best decision for him.
So after you make that change, you change to a different position. Was there a moment in the years after where it really hit you that you could really have a go of this and make it as a professional player?
It was funny. I was asked this question the other day, Gareth, and
Were you?
there wasn't really a moment. There wasn't like a hala moment where I thought, I'm going to make this. It was something that I always dreamed of. It was something that I thought if I carried on training and developing and playing, and there was never a real thought in my mind that I was going to be a professional. It was just, that was my dream. And it just happened naturally for me. I got into the England under 15 squad. And I think that was a big push for me as well. At 16, QPR sent me out on loan to a men's league team, which I absolutely hated. I got kicked from pillar to post. But I was playing with grown-ass men who were fighting for win bonus or trying to get their team higher up in the league. And being in that changing room really matured me in a way that I thought, maybe I can handle this. But if I'm going to play football at professional level, I do not want to play at this level. So they kind of scared me in a way where I had to put extra work in. And there's certain cards that fell my way. Obviously, I had a big profile back in the early 90s. A lot of managers love playing with a big striker and a little striker, a big man, little man kind of combination. And I was one of those guys, and I was lucky that I progressed into the team at a right young age, and we were a pretty successful team in London at that time. We had a very, very good squad, aging squad, but a very good squad. And I was very, very lucky and fortunate to be part of it. But it was a great moment in my career, playing for my local club that I dreamed of, I supported, I followed away from home as a fan, and suddenly I'm playing in front of my friends and family at Loftus Road at a young age.
Which is incredible, because this was a time where English football and the Premier League in its modern day structure really came to life and was really growing to prominence. And you mentioned it, you need coaches that are on your side, but need some cards to fall your way as well. In 95, QPR sold Les Ferdinand to Newcastle, leaving you as a young player some very big shoes to fill. You had to be nervous at that time, Danny. I mean, this is an absolute legend who moved on.
Yeah, and he was a massive part of our club as well, Wills. He was Sir Les. We called him Sir Les. He was a guy that came into football at a later age. He didn't develop through any academies. He had a little bit of a different upbringing. He was from the same area as me in West London, so we had that connection first of all, and he took me under his wing. But when he eventually left, and he deserved to leave as well, Wills, he wanted to go on to bigger and better things. He was just breaking into the England squad. He was a mountain of a man. He was someone I really looked up to. But I knew deep down that I could never fill his boots. I was still a young pup. I was a skinny, runt, tall guy with a bad haircut who scored a few goals. And now I was trying to replace the great Sir Les. So there was a lot of pressure on me. I didn't feel humongous pressure on me because when you're a younger player, you play with a lot of freedom. You don't have the off the field pressure of a wife and family to provide for, a mortgage to pay, a new contract to earn. You're playing with a lot of freedom. But I knew that I had to perform for my local club, the club that I supported, to try and keep us in the Premier League. And it was very difficult for me and another QPR supporter, Kevin Gallen, who were two young boys that were kind of put in the team to say, you got to try and perform for us, guys, and keep us in the Premier League.
So is that what they told you? Just go out there and do your best.
Yeah,
Here you go.
We were given a lot of belief as well. We were obviously developed from a young age. Myself and Kev had played together since we were around 12, 13 at QPR. So we developed through the teams, through the ranks together. He was a fantastic striker as well. He had a really bad injury early on in his career, which gave him a bit of a setback because he would have gone on to bigger and better things as well. But looking back on it now, we were still far too raw and young to cope with what we were, with the job that was entailed.
Right. You obviously had the long hair at that time. You were a popular local boy, supporter of the team, big presence up front. Also off the field, you were a DJ. Tell us about being DJ Mellow D. Is that what you're actually called? Is that true? I read it.
There's two different meanings to that. So DJ Mellow, because I played very mellow garage house music from the US, which was new to England because there was a lot of kind of techno music going on, and I love Chicago house and other kind of soft garage music. So I played a lot of mellow dance. So I was known as the mellow garage DJ that used to play the music. And then obviously my initial was D. And then someone said, oh, it's really, really very clever that you thought of that name because it has two different meanings. You play a lot of melodies, but you're a mellow DJ. And I was like, I didn't even think about that, but thanks for letting me know. But that was my stupid DJ name early on when I was on pirate radio stations and doing local dances and house raves back in the day. And it kind of built up and snowballed because I had a love for music at a very young age as well. That was kind of stemmed from my dad being a very, very big Motown and rare groove and old soul lover. Sure. And he played that in the background. So that was my background music growing up. Not that I was hearing it or dancing to it, but it was always on in the background. And I think that kind of stayed with me for a long, long time. And I loved music. I didn't play golf. A lot of the professionals and footballers played golf back in the day, and I had no interest in it. So I would train, whether we were doing double sessions or one session, and I would go down to my local record store and see what new songs were coming out or what new flavors were coming out for the weekend that I could play in my set at the weekend or on my radio set.
So was it tough to balance, and did it ever get you in trouble? The fact that, you know, you're Superman by day, your suit would be your kit, and then at night you're on the clubs DJing.
I think early on it was a lot more easier to balance, Gareth, because I wasn't in, I'm not saying I was a big name player, but I wasn't in the limelight back then. I wasn't playing in the Premier League. But as I started to progress higher up the ranks, and it was actually coincidental because the higher I got in playing in the Premier League or playing for England under 21s, the more clubs wanted me to DJ at bigger clubs and bigger festivals. And I had an agent for my music and DJ career, and I had an agent for my football career, and they clashed so much. At the end of it, like my good friend and mentor and a coach of mine who sadly passed away a couple of years ago, Ray Wilkins, pulled me aside and said, you basically have to make a decision now, Dan. We know you love your music and it's great that you have that passion, but your real passion is football. And this is what's going to give you a career. This is what's going to give you a life to provide for your future family. And I remember them words very, very clearly. And I respect them words because as a young player, sometimes they go in one ear and out the other. So I took that aboard. I slowly started weaning away my DJing, club visits and parties and radio stations, and done it more as a hobby and really focused on my football.
That's interesting. And Wilkins, such a lovable man, beloved by so many people. Danny, when someone like that comes up to you and has a word, you know, you really take it for what it's worth. You know, there's value behind that. For
sure. And he was a guy that I played with as a young man growing up. He was in the first team. He was just finishing his career. He went to another club to finish his career, and then incidentally came back to the club to be a head coach and a manager for QPR in the Premier League. So I had a huge amount of respect for him. He played for AC Milan. He played for Manchester United. He captained England. And he wasn't a hollerer. He wasn't a guy that shouted a lot, but when he spoke, you listened. And he was a guy that knew how to talk to me. and I had a lot of respect for him. And I still remember those words vividly. And I think I could have gone on a different pathway if I wasn't kind of supported in a way which he supported me. And I thank him a lot for that. But I still love my music to present day. I don't DJ as much. The DJing circuit has changed completely to how I used to take my record boxes to gigs and in my house. Now it's all electric. It's all on laptops. It's Serato, whatever it is.
You could have brought it back during the pandemic, DJ Mellow D 2020, because everyone's doing that right now. Just stream it on Instagram.
Could have done some live sets for you, Gareth.
Yeah. So I went back and I was looking through the Danny Dichio highlight reel. I came across your goal against Wolves, which I totally forgot about. I remember watching it once upon a time, but in 97, an absolute rocket. Was it 35, 40 yards out?
I tell everyone it was 45 yards out, but it's probably around 25 yards out, 30 yards out.
Is that the best goal you've ever scored, you think?
I think from a technique point of view, yes, 100%. I still have no idea why I did it. It was just instinct. I could never really volley a ball cleanly, side foot, but I could, with my laces, but I could always volley a ball by curling it or hitting it with the inside of my foot. And I actually scored a goal for TFC against Colorado at BMO, but it was more inside the box, just outside the box, very similar. And I go back to that goal and I go back to scoring it and the elation afterwards. And then I remember the great Jimmy Greaves was commentating on the game at the time, and he was, I have absolutely no idea why he tried that. And then in the interview afterwards, Ray Wilkins was the coach again, and he's speaking and he's saying what a great goal it was. And Jimmy Greaves was speaking to me saying, did you mean that? And I said, well, of course I meant that, being the brash 20-year-old that I was. And said, I do that all the time. And Ray calmly said, stop there, Danny, let's tell the truth, because you try that in training at least 10 times, and 9 of those balls we have to collect from the road at the back of the training ground. So he kind of put me in my place again there. But it was the best goal that I scored, and I'm glad it was televised because I can provide that evidence to my kids saying that I scored a 40-yard volley once.
I mean, you've had a lot of great moments over the course of your career and played for some big clubs. But is that your absolute highlight, playing for the team that you supported growing up, your time with QPR breaking in? Was that it? Is that your favorite time?
I think looking back on it, it was such a good time because it was such a great experience to play for my hometown club.
Right.
And I try to explain that to the younger players at Toronto FC. And I know that we don't have as many clubs here in Canada. Luckily, we have Montreal, Toronto, and Vancouver, and now Ottawa, and now we have the CPL clubs coming in to the mix as well. But to try and give them that understanding that I was fortunate to train in my local environment. I didn't have to travel very far to go to my training ground. I had the dream of playing for the club that I used to go and support at away games, as I said. And I tried to push that onto them and that feeling and that understanding. And some of them, I think, get it, but the majority will never understand how much it means to play for your local club, because a lot of professional players don't have that opportunity, Gareth. A lot of them are obviously, we have so many clubs in England, they develop at different academies. It's very difficult to move into your own academy in your local area and move into the first team. So we're seeing that a lot less now, because obviously a lot of the big clubs are bringing players in from all around the world, and it's very difficult to make it at your local club if you're a London boy. But I was very fortunate. I was very happy, but I wouldn't say it was the best time of my career.
A lot of English players decide to stay home, play within the country rather than going abroad. Things have gradually changed a little bit over time, which maybe was a little bit surprised to some that you made the move to Italy to play for Sampdoria. You went on loan with Lecce as well. How did that come about? And just how different was footballing from a playing perspective, from a lifestyle perspective, making that move from where you were to where you went?
Well, I mentioned that my father's Italian, so it was always a dream of his for me to play in Serie A. I was coming towards the end of my contract at QPR. They'd offered me a new contract, but I wasn't happy with the way that the club was moving forward. They sacked Ray Wilkins. They brought in 2 new coaches that I didn't really see eye to eye with. They were very regimented, very old school, and we got relegated. And I had offers to go to Premier League clubs. So they decided that they wanted to sell me to Wimbledon or Sunderland. And I said, you know what? I got 6 months left on my contract. I'm going to make the decision of where I am going to go, because I'm on a Bosman ruling, which just come into effect that year, where a younger player can now be out of contract and decide where he wants to go. So I'd had Napoli and Sampdoria approach me, and we decided as a family to go across to Genoa to speak to Sampdoria. They put on the glitz and glamour, and I signed there and then. I didn't even go and speak to Napoli because of what Sven-Goran Eriksson and the rest of the group really provided, and said that they wanted me to be a part of at Sampdoria. So it was an easy decision for me in the end. It was tough leaving QPR because, as you know, it's somewhere I'd been since I was 9 years old. But it was a new chapter for me, and I wanted to play in Italy. The Italian league was starting to bubble nicely. There was all this hysteria of the Gazette, the 90s football in Italy. The World Cup had just happened there as well, Will. So there was a huge amount of kind of buzz around the Italian league, and I wanted to be a part of that.
It's a beautiful place to be. It's a beautiful place to go. Your time there didn't work out however, you only played a couple games. Why was that? Was it difficult to adjust? Was it opportunity? What was it, Deech?
I think it was a little bit of both. If I'm being brutally honest, Gareth, I think I went there too young.
Did you?
I was still in the early stages of my career. I played a good number of games in the first team, but I still wasn't a regular in the first team. And whether I was falling out with the head coach at the time because of the way he wanted to play or the way he wanted to train, I was still young and raw, and I should have stuck at it. I feel if I went to Italy at an older age, I think I would have stayed in Italy for a lot longer. Really? Sven-Goran Eriksson actually left that summer and went to join Lazio with a host of other players from Sampdoria who'd won the league 2 years prior to me joining them. And an older manager came in to Sampdoria, an older Argentinian manager called Cesar Menotti, who'd won the World Cup with Argentina, but he was a very old school way thinking guy. He wanted to use his veterans. And we had a really big squad, and it was difficult for me at the time to get into that squad. They signed Jurgen Klinsmann for 1 year. Montella was a player there. Karen Burr. They had a whole host of guys there, which I thought, this is just amazing going to train with these guys and being part of this squad. But I really felt that I don't think I'm going to have the opportunity to play regular games here. So I stuck it out for around 3 or 4 months with Sampdoria, and then I spoke to the owners and said, look, this is not working out for me, but it's not working out for you. So I said, I want to play. I want to go to a team where I'm going to be playing in Serie A. That's what I came across. That's why I left England. And they agreed. They said, look, if the coach is not going to play you, then we'll find you a suitable place where you're going to get games. And that's when I went on loan to Lecce. Same kind of thing happened at Lecce. I went there. I played 4 or 5 games. I scored a goal in the league, scored a goal in the cup. But they were going through a little bit of a transition period. It's funny, they had a younger manager in charge, Prandelli, who went on to manage at Fiorentina and Italy as well in the Euros. Very studious guy, very disciplined guy, but very kind of in himself, introvert. Couldn't really get a grasp of what he wanted. Didn't communicate well with us. And I thought, this is going to be a T-junction in my career here. I'm either going to fall by the wayside and just bubble out of the picture. And I said to my agent, I need to get back to England and get my career back on track, because this is not working here. Whether I was young and a little bit.
Do you regret that, Deech, that you didn't, whether it was, Lecce, Sampdoria, or another club, that you didn't see, spend some more time to stay in that country rather than going back to England?
In retrospect, I should have gone back to Sampdoria. That's what I should have done. I should have stuck it out there and continued learning the game. I learned so much in preparing and how to look after myself and how to train properly in Italy than I previously learned as a young player growing up in England. The difference in the tactical side of the game as well was very different in Italy. So I can't value that experience enough. But I just felt at that time, I was 22, 23 years old. I just played for the England under-21s the year before, and I wanted to get into the England B team. I wanted to continue playing in the Premier League, and I just felt I needed to get back to playing.
Well, you came back to two clubs back to back. The clubs gained promotion. That Sunderland team, you went back to England. I mean, you're still playing with top strikers up front, two club legends in Kevin Phillips and Niall Quinn. 105 points in that season to gain promotion to the league. It's funny because a lot of young people will be watching Sunderland Till I Die now and seeing the struggle, but you were there during the good years when the team was on the rise, weren't you?
That's correct. And it's actually really sad to watch that program for me. It's a fantastic program, really, really well filmed, and I love the storyline. But I think everyone that is a football fan can see how much the community loved that club. And that's why I'd probably say that was the best time in my career playing for Sunderland.
Really?
For 4.5 years, I was totally ingrained in football culture up there. It's a very blue-collar working town. Everyone goes to the game. Everyone works hard all week, 9-to-5 job. And their main focus of the weekend is going to the pub and then going to that game on a Saturday. And that game, that 90 minutes, totally sways whether you have a good weekend or whether you have a terrible weekend. Whether you're a player, coach, staff member, fan, person that works in the media there. And it is so sad to see where they are at the moment. But I really hope they get back up there because it's a fantastic club.
So that was the favorite time of your career. That's interesting you say that. And I get the atmosphere, the real football and culture there, but the teammates as well and the success you had, that had something to do with it as well, didn't it?
For sure. And we had a fantastic manager, Peter Reid, who's another ex-England international. Yep. He had a great staff with him. Adrian Heath, who's now the coach at Minnesota, was his assistant. Bobby Saxton, real characters, real players, people. And they built a squad that really, really enjoyed playing together, but complemented each other very, very well. Really deep squad. And I still speak to Sunderland fans now, and they mentioned that team that we had back in the late 90s were the best team that they've ever watched for their timeline. And obviously, going back to the 70s and 60s where Sunderland were very, very successful. But the group of players that we had back then were a real pleasure to play with. But going by the fans' point of view, was a real pleasure to watch as well.
So when West Brom came calling, was it a difficult decision for you to leave Sunderland and drop down a division, or was it about playing time? Was it about opportunity?
Yeah, I think going back to that stage of my career, I'd spoken to the head coach at the time, Peter Reid, and I'd mentioned that my family, my wife, had wanted to move back down to London. We just had our second child. She wanted to be close to her mum, who was falling ill at the time. So I'd asked for the opportunity to try and get back down towards London because obviously Sunderland is in the northeast, which is a good 7 hours away from London. It's like Toronto and playing in Thunder Bay. You're that far away. Obviously not as far, but it was difficult because
Seems like it.
Really loved playing for Sunderland. I wasn't playing as much. They were going through a little bit of a transition in replenishing the squad, the aging squad that we'd had and done so well, which every club has to do. You go through a stage where a team's been very successful, but as they start to get older, you need to bring in new players. And a lot of those new players didn't really work out. And I just felt my opportunities were not as strong as what they were in the previous 3 or 4 years. And I spoke openly with the head coach, who was very, very honest with me. And he said, look, you've done a great job for us. I'm never going to stand in your way. I respect you.
Sure.
And if you can find a club that's closer to London, then we will make this happen. And Crystal Palace were interested at the time. We'd gone down there to speak to them. and their head coach got sacked the following day after agreeing contracts and stuff like that. And I just felt my whole world kind of blow up. And these are kind of stories that you don't really hear about in the press, which footballers go through. And there's many different stories of players not going to certain clubs where they wished, or leaving clubs because of off the field situations. And that was one of mine. And I just had to get close to London. And luckily West Brom had come in. West Brom were a club in Birmingham, which is an hour and a half away from London. So the commute was a lot easier. I went
Did
there
you do the commute? You traveled from London
So
for
my
training?
family home was in London now, and I would probably travel 2 days of the week, commute up, and then stay for 3 days in Birmingham. And I went there on loan, first of all. We did pretty well when I was on loan, and they managed to agree a deal with Sunderland, a full permanent transfer. And I stayed there for 2.5 years with West Brom in the Championship and then the Premier League.
After West Brom, I mean, it must be difficult for a player once you start moving to stop moving, right? To find your roots and be able to stay in one place. You bounced around after that, Derby County, Millwall, Preston. How difficult is it for a player when you kind of haven't found exactly what you're looking for, the right fit, whether it be for the club or yourself, Danny, over the course of that period of your career?
Well, it's difficult because when I was at West Brom, I had a love-hate relationship with the head coach. I'd obviously been brought in and done pretty well, played pretty well, but we didn't see eye to eye, me and the coach. I went to Derby on loan because I just had a hernia operation and I needed to get match fitness. So I went there for a month, came back and did pretty well again, but fell out with the head coach again. So I then went to Millwall, and coincidentally enough, Ray Wilkins was the assistant coach there. So Millwall's obviously a club in London, so my family home's in London. It ticked off a lot of boxes for me. Dennis Wise, the ex-Chelsea captain, was the head coach, player manager. And it was a time where I felt that I was starting to be an experienced older player in my career, and that clubs valued me for that, but also I wanted to play.
Sure.
Spent a lot of time at Sunderland as an understudy to Niall Quinn, still playing minutes here and there and getting my starts here and there, but I wanted to go to a team where I was the number one starter as the number 9 position, and it wasn't happening at West Brom, so that's when Millwall come calling, and I had an interesting year and a half there at Millwall as well.
You made an FA Cup final run, but you weren't able to play in the final due to suspension. I believe you scored in this. Did you score in the semifinal of that FA Cup run?
Final.
The quarterfinal.
Yeah.
How disappointing is it when you and your team reach that final and you're unable to play? I mean, that's every kid's dream to play in an FA Cup final growing up.
Probably what was the highest point of my career, the most enjoyable part in Sunderland, but I would say missing the FA Cup final was the lowest point of my career, Gareth. And that was a real tough time for me. And I asked myself a lot of questions, whether I wanted to carry on playing, because
really,
yeah, you mentioned it. It's every kid's dream to play in the FA Cup final. And I'd been that goofy kid when I was younger, watching all the build up to the FA Cup final, like an early time on a Saturday morning, watching all the prep, all the players walk in their terrible suits and talking about their dreams of winning the FA Cup and lifting it. And as I was getting later in my career, the probably deepest I'd been was probably the 6th round of the FA Cup. So to get to the quarterfinals, then the semi-finals was a really good draw, and then get to the final and have that opportunity taken away from me for a silly red card was a real down moment for me. And I went away for a few days with my wife just to contemplate and really decide whether I wanted to carry on. We thought about just packing everything up and moving the kids across to North America. It was always our dream to move across to North America. My wife is an American passport holder, and we contemplated it. But my wife was really good with me. She kind of put me instead. And she said, look, this is something you've done since you were 9 years old. You can't let a referee dictate how you're going to finish your career. And she was right at the time. It was difficult because I attended the FA Cup. I was involved in all the prep, and the team and the club were really good with me. But to be there on that day, I was basically a ghost sitting in the stadium, Gareth.
Incredible. Very difficult. And I mean, to have that taken away by a silly red card, it doesn't seem just. And other great players, they haven't had that opportunity to play in a cup final. I mean, I'm a United supporter, you know, going into a Champions League final without a Paul Scholes or a Roy Keane, you know, these sorts of things happen. And unfortunately, that's part of the game. We have about 15 minutes left. I don't mean to just skip over a chunk of your career, but we got to get to that move when inevitably you did come across the Atlantic and you didn't land in the United States. You landed right here in the city of Toronto. How did that move come about? And listen, any expansion team joining any new club that's starting from scratch, you know there's going to be change. You know there's going to be a difficult process. But what convinced you that that was the right move and this was the right city for you and your family to come to?
Well, we were really coming into it blind, to be quite honest, Gareth.
Really?
Yeah. I'd been over to Los Angeles to speak with the Galaxy the summer before. I'd spoken to Chicago. I'd actually went to Chicago down in Florida to spend a week with them at their preseason camp. Things didn't work out there because of a green card. They thought I had a green card because of my wife, but I explained to them that I'd never ever lived in America, so I could never have a green card. My agent at the time that had organized everything with Chicago, I sacked him. I came back to England, and Mo Johnson had been on the phone and said, look, we'd heard what's gone on with Chicago. We'd love to have you here. We've played 3 or 4 games as it is, but we need you over here ASAP. And that's how it basically unfolded. I went back to the president of Preston North End at the time, who was a great guy, and he knew that at the end of my contract, I wanted to come to North America. And I asked him if I could leave early, and he said, look, we're in the middle of the final part of the season. And I said, yeah, but the coach really hasn't played me as much as we know he could. And we're not going to go up. We're not going to go down. So I've never caused you any trouble. And he basically gave me the handshake. And I thank him for that, because I don't think I would have been here for the first game if that didn't happen. I would have had to wait to the end of the English season before I could join Toronto FC. So I kind of pushed it through. The president of Preston North End helped me with it. And I came here after the 4th game of the season, and me, my family at the time, we'd arrived wide-eyed to a big city. We loved Chicago. We thought that was going to be our new home. But we felt straight away that Toronto was very, very similar to Chicago. The downtown, near the lake, big kind of skyline. And we felt very at home straight away in the first week.
Who's the gentleman at Preston North End? Because forget Edson Buttle. I mean, he really gets the assist on the first goal in Toronto FC history, because if he didn't give you that handshake, it would have been someone else that they're singing their name in the stands.
I can't remember the president's name. I can see his face. I can't remember his name. But he's no longer the president at Preston North End. But again, as you said, that would never have happened. Sod Edson Buttle, without that guy, I wouldn't have even been here.
Crazy. So you come to Toronto, a brand new team, a brand new field. You're playing on turf, a cast of characters. Your buddy Jimmy Brennan, Mo John, and all these guys are.
Hold on,
Carl Robinson.
Rewind, because I have to tell you one story as well about me first turning up at BMO. So I turn up at BMO, and I'm kind of looking at the stadium, and I'm walking out the tunnel, and I've suddenly gone, wow, that field looks really green. Beautiful, that field. And then I suddenly walk out on it, and there's like black pebbles, and I kind of looked at someone, I gone, is that a plastic pitch? And they said, yeah, there's AstroTurf. And I went, no one told me that, like, our home field is AstroTurf. And so Mo kind of gave me a wink, and Jimmy was laughing in the background. I had no idea that we were playing and training on AstroTurf. I had 2 back operations in my career. Playing on AstroTurf was possibly the worst thing in the later stages of my career. That if my doctor that done my surgeries ever knew that I finished my career on AstroTurf, he would have probably kicked me from here to kingdom come.
Unfortunately, Maurice Edu was inevitably sacrificed, and apparently that money came in and purchased the new actual grass that came into that place. But honestly, Deech, I've said this to other players who have come through. I'm like, that limited the careers of so many players that played on it. How much of an impediment was it to you staying fit, staying available, staying healthy, and allowing Toronto FC to succeed during those early years?
It was tough. It was really tough, and you have to remember as well, Wills, that we trained on it as well. It's not only that we played on it, we trained on it every day. And I'm not being a prima donna or one of these fancy bands where you have to train on perfect grass fields every day, but it has an impact on players that struggle with ankle injuries, knee injuries, back complaints, goalkeepers that have to dive on that every day. And I have a lot of respect for the guys within the league, like New England still play on it. Who else? Portland still play their home games on it. Seattle as well. I have a lot of respect for them because for me, for the league to be taken seriously, and it's come on leaps and bounds throughout the years now, Will, since we were playing early on in the 2000s. The league is fantastic. But for me, we have to have football-specific stadiums with grass fields. If we want to be considered to be top 5 in the world, that has to be happening very, very soon. And I hope that's something that's in the CBA coming up. I know they've just agreed on a CBA, but I spoke to Mike Bradley a number of times about things that he's not happy with still in the new CBA. And it could be anything from football lines on the fields, flying as a team, being as we have to travel so many hours and so many miles throughout the season. So there's a lot of stuff still that needs to be tweaked. But for me, the league's moving in a perfect pathway compared to where we used to be in the early 2000s. And I was in 2007. I speak to some of the guys like Robin Fraser, Dan Kalichman, Greg, those guys that played even earlier. And they said, whoa, you don't even know what we used to play on in the early years of the MLS.
Believe it or not, Deech, like over the years, the quality of the turf has improved. Incredibly. We used to train at Lamport where TFC 2 used to play a few years ago, and literally growing up, the best players in the province would play on a carpet. It was like a rug. It wasn't even AstroTurf. It was just a carpet laid on top of concrete. So you're absolutely right. And people ask, well, why hasn't Canadian football developed these players over the years? Well, the quality and the quality around you in terms of the conditions that you play and train in, they go a long way to creating professional players and a professional environment for the talent to actually be cultivated. I'm shocked that you didn't know it was turf when you made the move over here. That's crazy. So how much, whenever there's an expansion team, do you cheer for them to not score a goal? So, I mean, Cincinnati scored early this year, but because 383 minutes into a season is still a record, and MLS continues to put it up. 2007, Toronto FC, the longest expansion team ever to go without scoring a goal.
Have Nashville scored yet?
I believe they did. Yeah, I think it was a 2-1 game they played in. I believe
the guy they got from LAFC, I think, scored, the defender.
Yes. So
waiting for that to be
broken. Is it like Miami Dolphins? You know, like when they had the perfect record, they'd always pop the balls of champagne.
Yeah.
So.
No, I mean, listen, I wasn't here for the first 4 games of this season during that 2007 season, but by all accounts, they were unlucky on some moments to not score. And even before I scored my first goal against Chicago, there was moments where I think Ronnie O'Sullivan hit a great shot in the game and the keeper just tipped it over. So
Ronnie O'Brien.
Ronnie O'Sullivan. That's the snooker player. I'm not talking about. But there's moments, and I think I speak to my wife about this, and it was just meant to be. I was in the right place at the right time, and maybe it was God just giving me a pat on the back to say, hey, you've had a good career. This is your little cherry on the cake for being a super nice, humble guy, not the best of players, but a good servant to the game. And I thank him for that, because it definitely put me in history of Toronto FC, a club that I've embraced and that my family and myself love very, very much and continue to be a part of, and very happy to be a part of.
You had a 17-year playing career. You played for some big clubs, but that's how you're best known, right? You're known as being the player who scored the first goal in Toronto FC history. How do you handle that? Is it pretty cool to have that? Or are you like, well, I had this good game against this team and that, and you're just talking about this one goal I scored on May 12th in 2007?
It's strange. It's very strange for me because, first of all, you speak about an expansion team, Gareth, and in England, we don't have expansion teams because there's such a long history of clubs throughout the UK that have been going for many, many years. So to come across and be part of a club in its first year is strange for any player coming from Europe. It's unheard of. So even speaking to my friends and telling them that I was the first goal scorer of the club, they're like, yeah, but so what? Like, who knows? Who cares? So it's great for the European to grasp that, but I can totally understand it from a North American point of view. And it's something people still stop me in the street for. I got stopped in my local grocery store the other day by an old Italian guy who was speaking to me, and he said, hey, and he was explaining to his son, who was a younger guy, this is the first goal scorer of Toronto FC. And I was like, oh, yeah, I actually was. It kind of triggers me to remember that moment as well. And it was a fantastic day, not only for the goal, but for us getting our first win. It was a lovely, hot summer's day. The jubilation of the seat cushions raining down on us, the sending off. It was just a whole mixture of feelings that day that really escalated to it being a special day for the club and for myself.
It's funny because, you know, being a Torontonian and growing up and wanting something like this to come to life and work out in such an incredible way. Like, there's certain moments you remember from that first season. You remember the first goal scored at BMO Field and Eddie Johnson scored it, but I remember the beer flying down at his, there's a picture where the pint of beer is like about to hit him in the face. It didn't hit him, thankfully. Your goal in the seat cushions, pandemonium in that place. And then wasn't it the last game of the year at BMO Field when you scored the equalizer? I think it was a 2-2. And it was pandemonium. It was, again, people rushed the field. Like, I remember that goal almost as well as the first goal that was scored.
Yeah, that was a bizarre moment.
That was crazy.
I wasn't actually meant to play in that game. And I think Mo had basically spoken to Carmelo at the time, our physio, and said, look, is there any chance of Danny playing? And Carmelo was like, not really. He's got a sprained ankle. And Mo was like, but come on, we want to try and end the season on a little bit of a high. We didn't get into the playoffs. And so I said to Mo, look, I'm not going to start the game, but if we wrap up and I take a couple of painkillers, I'm sure I'll be good to go for around 20 minutes. He ends up putting me on at like the 40, after like 40 minutes to go. And I'm like hobbling around like a big boy. And I remember swinging, I think, was it Parkhurst scored an unbelievable goal in that game?
I think it was. I think it was Parkhurst.
Yeah, I'm sure he scored like a goal from the halfway line that chipped Sutts or our goalkeeper. And I remember coming on late, and it was a bizarre game. The fans were all jubilant because it was the last game of the season, and I scored the goal, and we drew the game. And there was a mass pitch invasion at the end where they couldn't get the fans off for like an hour or so, and they were just celebrating. But I go back to trying to tell people that I think that was the fans just embracing and saying, we've got a football team here to stay. We weren't the best of teams. We haven't had much to cheer about this year, but let's just celebrate and look forward to next year and sink another couple of beers.
I hope you don't mind. I'm going to keep you for an extra 5, Danny. I just have a couple more things I want to touch on because, I mean, people remember the struggles of Toronto FC to become a winning club and what it took to get there. But there were some positive moments that came after that first season. Look, a Canadian championship came. And in 2009, I mean, it was the final game of the season. It was capitulation against the New York Red Bulls, but that team was that close to making it to the playoffs. And I remember speaking to someone, maybe it might have been Mo himself back in the day. And he swore that if John Carver, the head coach at the time, the second head coach after Mo, if he didn't end up leaving the club. He thought that he could have brought that group together and the team would have kicked on and beat a playoff team, at least during that juncture, that period of time. Do you believe that group of players was maybe a little bit underrated and underappreciated, and maybe they were just lacking a little bit of something, maybe with stability with coaching? What do you make of that comment and that group that you played with in the second and third season?
I'm not sure. I think we improved the squad dramatically. I think the inclusion of Dwayne coming in, De Guzman coming in, but we still had a couple of young players that were supplementing the big earners within that group. I've always said that for me, for a team to be successful, there needs to be consistency. And in the early years at Toronto FC, there was so much turnaround. You know this as well, Wills, that not only the players couldn't get a grasp of what they were meant to do on the field, but the staff in general off the field. There was so much turnaround and different structure and philosophies in the way the club was being run. And for me, that was our biggest fault early on. And maybe if we stuck with JC, with John Carver for a couple more years, it might have worked out for him. Maybe it wouldn't have. But there was just so much turnaround, and a lot of decision making was wrong. People that we brought in were not the right people for that role or that job at that present time. There were some people that we'd lost that were the right people at that time to take the club forwards. And I think you see it now in present day. Greg's been at the club for what, six or 7 years now. And the consistency, not only with him and his staff, but with the players, the group of players that they've had for a good chunk of that time, has moved us on to be contenders year in, year out. And players see that, whether you're a player playing for Toronto FC or you're a player that maybe is thinking about coming to Toronto FC. And what we've brought in has been fantastic. What we've lost has hurted us, but we've improved the squad, we've improved the infrastructure, and the club's moving in the right direction. It's taken us a long time, and myself and Carmelo, who I mentioned early on, have been the standout day one guys that have seen the club move through and transition through all these different, I don't know, like
is it just you two left? I was racking my, I've been covering the team since day one, but it's you and Carmelo, and I'm not sure if there's anyone else who's a day oneer who remains at the club. There's got to be pride in that, Danny.
There's a lot of pride in it. There's also a lot of pressure on myself as well, because I feel that the club have seen me in the light. I don't want to be seen as just a mascot, the guy that scored the first goal and we're going to keep him on just because he's Danny Dichio. I've got a lot of pressure to do my job and to develop younger players and to have an input in my coaching philosophy and to help the staff and to help Mike Munoz now in CFC2 and in really pushing our younger talent. We've got a wealth of talent coming through at Toronto now, and there's something that's been missing at the moment, and Greg's alluded to it, whether it be resilience, whether it be mental strength. And we need to really fix that, because we want to see younger boys from our academy pushed into the first team and represent the club.
There has been a number of very good young players who have come through the club in the academy system while you've been there. I mean, Mark Anthony Kay is the one guy that everyone says is the guy that got away, but there's been success stories developed at the club. Daniil Henry, he joined us a few weeks ago. Players now plying their trade in the Canadian Premier League. Is there individuals that have come through that, you know, you just saw real potential in them, and maybe you still do, and they're not even at the club anymore, and it's kind of like a badge of honor that you played a role in the development of these young players?
100%. And I love seeing players that I've worked with playing in the CPL now, or playing around the continent, or branching out to Korea where Daniil's playing now, or playing in lower leagues in Europe. For me, not every player that we work with in the academy is going to work his way through to the first team, Wills. But if I can have an impact and and help that young player in his development and guide him in the right way, it's just a small part. At the end of the day, it's got to come from the player. But to see so many players and having the opportunity to play either in the CPL now or USL or MLS with our first team squad, there's like 9-10 guys now that have graduated through the academy that are training with the first team every day, to be playing with the likes and training with Josie, Michael Bradley, Pozuelo, Yati, stellar guys, Gonzalez, guys that have had really, really good careers that are now helping our younger players with that final piece of their development to see if they can stay at that level. Because we've helped them to a certain point, Wills, but now that final stage doesn't only come from the staff, it comes from the players that they're training and playing with every day.
I mean, Tristan Borges was in the Toronto FC Academy. He goes on and wins the MVP last year. I mean, did that surprise you, just how good he was in that league?
No, we knew Tristan was a really good player from a young age, but he had aspirations of going to Europe. He wanted a first team deal, and the club weren't prepared to give him a first team contract. So it's fair enough if the player comes to a decision and says, okay, if I'm not getting a first team opportunity here, I want to go to Europe and try and make it there. It didn't work out in Europe for him. He's come back to the CPL and been a standout player, and rightly so. He's a very talented young player. He's got himself into the national team as well. There's all different pathways for these younger players, Wills. It's never linear. It's not in a straight line for these guys. So there's lots of bumps and there's going to be a lot of hurdles. And I continue to say it to our younger players within the academy or T2. The resilience we're looking from you is when you're faced with adversity. How do you react to that? Are you going to mope around? Are you going to blame the coach? Are you going to blame your teammates? No. It comes from you within, and you've got to push through and really, really fight that to try and push yourself to be a professional player.
So, Danny, just before we get to our top 5 segment and wrap things up, I mean, the country, the footballing world is raving about Alphonso Davies, and rightfully so. But what about the quality of the young players coming through the Toronto FC Academy and other academies and clubs that you get to see on a firsthand basis? Has the talent been improving that much amongst young players? And is there a reason to believe that maybe not the next Alphonso Davies will come through, but players that can complement and really fill out, a solid national team program?
Absolutely. I have huge belief in what the academies and the pro clubs are doing, but also what youth clubs and academies throughout Toronto and Montreal, Ottawa, throughout the country, in Vancouver as well, that are not associated with the professional clubs are doing as well. They've improved their coaching. There's some very, very, very good coaches here in Canada, very knowledgeable, but the quality of play has improved dramatically as well. I watched Montreal last year, their U17s and the U19s, some fantastic players coming out of Montreal. Vancouver have a very strong base of older players that are now looking for that level to play at before they go to the first team. They got rid of their second team, so now there's that stopgap now where Vancouver need to provide that final piece, that final stage of development for these younger players with potential to play at. We're lucky enough to have that at Toronto, where our club make a massive investment, not only in the academy, but in Toronto FC2 now, to give our players that chance of playing at a professional level before they hit the first team, because it's still a development phase of these younger players, and it's a vital component to their development. They can't jump from the academy to the first team unless you're a special player. Even Alphonso played for Vancouver too, for I think a season and a half. So that foundation really set him off. I do believe at Toronto that we have an Alphonso Davies. We have one player at least that is going to be making that jump. I don't want to put pressure on the kid. I don't want to name him, but I have big belief in this boy. And I think we're going to see him within the first team this year. And I think we're going to see him for the national team for a long, long time, which gives me a big smile on my face.
Interesting. There's one of 2 players that come to mind. I'm not sure which one. Maybe you'll tell me off air. This has been great, Danny. I want to wrap things up. It's our top. It's kind of rapid fire. I ask you a question and you give me the best. So the best blank that you've ever You'll follow along. You're a smart guy. So our top 5, let's start off with the best player, the top player that you've ever played with on your team.
Best player. That's tough.
Played with a lot of really good players over the course of your career. Was there one talent that stood above the rest?
I'm going to go back to Ray Wilkins. Even though he was an older player and I was a young, sprightly player at the time, he just saw the game in a different. He understood the game in a different way. He was 2 or 3 passes ahead before he even received the ball. His head was on a swivel. He wasn't the quickest. His passing range was unbelievable, and he was a competitor as well. He was a nasty little bugger.
The best player you've ever played against?
I think I have to go. I wouldn't say that I played against him in position because it wasn't a defender that I played against.
That's fine.
But I would have to say when I watched this young boy on the field at the same time, and there's not many players that I open my mouth and go aghast with, it was Cristiano Ronaldo when he was at Manchester United. Just like pace, power, he was dancing on the ball. Our defenders were getting crazy with him. They wanted to put him in row Z, and they couldn't even get near the kid. And we were just laughing afterwards. This kid's only 19. He's 19.
That's crazy. And what a great thing to tell, your grandkids someday that you were on the same field as Cristiano Ronaldo.
Yeah.
Not bad.
Not that I think Cristiano knows who I am, but
he might. The Hammersmith horse. The best coach you ever had. Best coach.
Best coach? Again, I would go back to Ray.
Yeah.
Just purely because he was not only someone I respected, but someone I listened to, and a mentor, and a huge amount of experience and knowledge that he just passed on to us in a way that you took it in and you had that moment and going, yeah, I understand that now.
The best game you ever played in, or most memorable game you ever played in?
Best game I ever played in. That's a tough one. I wouldn't say it was the best result, but one of the craziest games I ever played in was a playoff final for Sunderland against Charlton. It was 4-4, finished 4-4, and we lost on penalties. Incredible. And that next year, so that was my first year with Sunderland. We went to the playoff final. The next year was the year we got 105 points in the championship and went up to the Premier League.
Crazy.
That was a crazy game.
Did you miss a sitter in that game, Danny, in the 4-4?
Thanks for reminding me.
Sorry to bring it. Sorry.
That game was only worth 75 million.
We're almost done, so I could bring that up at this point. And this is going to be interesting. There's a couple that come to mind. The best footballing moment of your career.
Best footballing moment. It has to be scoring the goal, the first goal. Listen, I played in front of, I was lucky enough to play in front of 60,000, 70,000 people, screaming, shouting, cheering for my team, throwing things at us. But I will always remember that day that we scored our first goal. And it wasn't my most exquisite goal, wasn't the most beautiful goal to look at, but the sheer elation and relief of everyone inside the stadium that day. And also a little bit of pressure from me, who was brought in to score goals because we hadn't scored a goal. Scoring that goal, I didn't realize the impact it would have on my life, but also the club in general.
What's very cool, that's our top 5 segment, by the way. Nice work, Danny. What's very cool about that is long after we're gone, in the 24th minute of Toronto FC games, they'll still sing your name. And fathers and mothers will be telling their sons and daughters about Danny Dichio. I mean, that's legendary status right there. And on top of that, now you're helping develop the young players of tomorrow, leaving a legacy on the field as well. So you have plenty to be proud of, buddy. You're an absolute gem, both on and off the field, and appreciate you taking some time here tonight. Thanks for doing this, dude.
Thank you, Wills. I appreciate it. It's great speaking to you guys. Hopefully we'll see you at the training ground soon in the open air.
Maybe. When are they going to let me back up there?
hopefully soon, within the next 2 or 3 weeks, I think we could see some light at the end of the tunnel.
I'll just tell them I know Danny Dichio, and we'll see what happens.
Security guard let you in.
Stay healthy, stay safe, Danny. Thanks for doing this, okay?
Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.
The one, the only Danny Dichio joining us inside the game. We'll be back next week at a new time, 2 p.m. Eastern time, 11 a.m. Pacific. If you want to rewatch this, go to our YouTube channel, the on-demand service with OneSoccer. You can watch any of these interviews at any time. I want to thank Danny. I want to thank David. I want to thank Armin. And I want to thank you as well. Stay home and stay safe, Canada. I am Gareth Wheeler, and we'll see you next week.